Welcome to the Symposium of Wild Hearts. I am your guide, Aisha Ophelia, and I'm here with Ruby Warrington, who is the creator of the Numinous and the co-creator of the Moon Club. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Aisha. It's so nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. So part of what the Symposium is really to give people a sacred space just to tap into the wisdom of their heart. So I'd love to just do like a quick breathing, centering exercise for all of us. So
yes.
For those of you who are listening later on, if you can close your eyes, feel free to do that because we're just going to get into the wisdom of the heart. So just closing your eyes for a moment. And really what we're doing in this space is just witnessing. And so we're looking at ourselves really through the lens of what a compassionate parent would to a child. So just noting that there's no right way to feel or wrong way to feel. We're really just here learning about ourselves. And just tuning in to see how your heart and the wisdom of your body speaks to you. And we're just going to take 3 big deep breaths together. And if you want to sigh it out, it's just tells your nervous system that you're okay, that you've arrived. Let's do that again. Just one more. And just fluttering your eyes back open. I'm always so amazed how different I feel when I just like take a minute to breathe. It's so refreshing.
Even a minute, right?
I know.
It's just like, oh, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's so nice to remember. So
it really is, yeah.
Instead of reading people's bios, I've decided to invite people into this kind of playful space. I don't have a name for this game yet, but it's 11 questions and they're very rapid fire. So it's like as soon as I'm asking them, you're answering. So it's like, you know, it is kind of vulnerable, but it's like getting out of your brain and just whatever, like there's no right or wrong answer. So are you game to play?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so these are 11 questions for you specifically.
Okay.
So what's your favorite word?
Numinous.
We're going to talk about that. What's gold made out of?
The sun.
I love it. Say the first name you think of.
Aisha.
What was Beyonce's first word?
Wow.
Why are you so relieved?
Because I can breathe.
How old is God?
Forever.
I can't even remember my writing. Oh, what is the pig saying when it oinks?
Feed me.
Show me your angry face. Say something smart.
That's really hard.
Okay, last question. Tell me a secret.
I'm really bossy and I think I'm a natural born leader.
I love it. Thank you. Ruby Warrington, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. They were great questions.
Thank you. It's just, it's a fun way to get the energy flowing, to get out of your brain. You can't anticipate. Yeah. It's helpful for me too, as, you know, just doing this. So
yeah, it's great. It just made me think about how we self-edit so much of what we share in the world now with social media and everything, always like, let me edit that. Let me make it sound quote unquote perfect. Right. And it was super, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Like, why not?
Nice. Well, thanks for playing. I've been so looking forward to this conversation because I've been thinking about some of the things we're going to talk about. And I would love to kind of start with, when I asked you what your favorite word was, I for some reason, I imagine us talking about this sort of Benjamin Button. So like from where you are now with the Numinous and kind of reversing back into what got you here. So for all of those people who are watching who don't know what that word means, can you enlighten us on the word and kind of how the Numinous began?
Yeah, so the Numinous, or just numinous as a word, I first heard in a conversation with a very early astrology mentor of mine, Shelley von Strunkel, who is probably in her 70s now. She's based in London. She's actually from LA originally, but she's the resident astrologer on the Sunday Times newspaper in the UK, where I used to work when I lived in the UK. And she used the word numinous in a conversation with me once, just talking about all things mystical. She used the word numinous to describe that which is unknown and unknowable.
I love it.
Like, it's just like the mystery. Yeah. It is the mystery. I suppose some people might call it God, although it's less about like any specific force. Numinous is the part of a human existence that we can't necessarily explain with words, that we can't edit down and make perfect, or that we can't kind of put in a box and say it's this or it's that. It's the part of being a human which is just indefinable. And so the way I think about it, in quite sort of basic terms in a way, it speaks to me to our emotional life. Because I think that for so many of us, like, our emotions are this unknowable, and it takes a lot of effort and work and introspection to really be able to understand our emotional life. And yet our emotions are essentially the force that kind of creates all of our thoughts, and therefore, you know, leads to all of our actions in the world. So the numinous to me is our emotional life. That's the name of my platform, which is a website and an Instagram and an event series, and do retreats and all kinds of things, actually. And I cover all sorts of different topics, subjects, practices, methodologies, philosophies that are really essentially about helping us tap into this numinous part of ourselves.
I love it.
And it's developed to become this over the years. I launched it about 5 years ago. And yeah, it's actually only really recently that I began to frame it as this idea about, well, what is it that it started off as an astrology platform, and then that branched out to tarot, and then that branched to all kinds of mystical or energy healing practices I was interested in, just all things mystical. And it was recently where I've been doing a big rebrand, which I'm launching in the summer. And I was really thinking, well, what is the common thread between all of these different things that I'm fascinated by and that we cover on this site? And it was this idea about, like, well, there are all ways to help us describe or make sense of our emotional states, our emotional life, what beyond even our emotions, that thing that drives us to do what we do and to feel the way that we are and to be the people we are in the world. So yeah, the Numinous it launched 5 years ago, I think. It kind of began as this little baby idea in my head a couple of years before that.
Let's go back there, because for so many people who are watching, they might see something that feels so fully formed, but it's good to go back to those beginning stages, that little seedling where it was like a word someone said to you that maybe encompassed this mystery that you were so curious about. Let's talk about that phase when it was that little seedling and maybe it just had a name.
That was exactly how it started, with the word, which became the name, right? So there was the word, and the word, exactly, it spoke to this thing that I was searching for in my life. I was working as features editor at the Sunday Times Style magazine at the time, which is super prestigious in the UK, and it was kind of like my dream job, whatever that meant. But there was definitely something major lacking for me in terms of not just the work that I was doing, but in terms of my life in general. And it was through deepening my study of astrology that I began to think, well, perhaps that something is like something, a connection to maybe, I don't know, spirituality or like my spiritual self. I grew up in a completely non-religious household, so there wasn't really ever any talk of like a higher power or anything kind of like greater than us or any higher purpose, right? So I was really just left to figure out what that might be for myself. And because of the world we live in, I attached all of my purpose to having a good career and like getting a good relationship, like all the kind of external things
that we think we need.
That we think we need, that we think are it, that we think are the meaning of life, right? And then I kind of like got lots of those and I was like, oh no, there's still just this emptiness. And what's that? What's in there? So it was astrology that kind of led me to really begin to investigate that for myself. And so through meeting Shelley and hearing that word, the Numinous, as soon as I heard the word, I saw it on the cover of a magazine.
I love it.
This was like, it's only like 7 years ago probably, and yet still I'm like, back in the day when people read magazines.
That's true. The landscape has changed drastically.
So fast. I was like, I'm going to make a magazine that's about all of these subjects that present.
Well, you kind of have. It's just not.
Yeah. It's just not tangible. Exactly. Yeah. It's a digital magazine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then it really took about 2 years from having the idea and kind of like obsessively thinking about it behind the scenes. Probably it took about 6 or 7 months before I mentioned it to anyone else in the world.
It's so important to highlight this because it takes time sometimes. You know, you're building up the courage, you're building up the strength, you're thinking about these things, and like you're watering that seed before it can like burst through. So
yes,
powerful.
You're strategizing in a sense, even though I didn't have any kind of like, you know, strategy, not in the sense of like creating a 5-year plan, but really it was like, well, what is this going to be? And how am I going to have the time and the energy to do this? And who do I need to get to help me? And all of these things. But to be honest, I probably would have gone on strategizing for like much longer. My husband ended up getting a job in New York. And so it was really like, scratch of the record, stop, okay, you're gonna start again over across the Atlantic. I was living in London at the time, so that was a kind of like a bit of a divine intervention into like, okay, you can't just like be sitting here treading water forever with this. Here's a space and an opportunity to actually do something different. So, but even then it took like another year to actually begin working on it. I was so scared that I wouldn't do it justice. That was a big part of it. This beautiful vision, and I was really scared that I wouldn't be able to do a good job, or that it would just fail really fast. And so
I mean, that's definitely there, but you're proof that if you know, regardless of what success means to you, you've affected so many people's lives. Like people's lives have been changed in droves by the Moon Club and the Numinous. So I mean, I think those fears you know, they can be founded because like we do want to do justice to our vision, but also, you know, we need to step out and trust that there is this bigger mysterious force that's guiding and leading and connecting.
Exactly. And still it's an ongoing, unfolding process. Like I said, I'm working on a big rebrand now because now I have Moon Club as well. And I also have something called Club Soda NYC, which is a whole other kind of side project. And I wanted to bring those things under the umbrella of the Numinous. So there's a whole new website, whole new mission statement.
Excited. I can't wait.
I'm really excited.
I mean, I love that emotional thread too, because I was like, oh, this is new to me. I haven't heard it described that way, but that is such a big connector to the mystery. It's like how we're feeling and how we're moving through the world.
It's our intuition. I mean, our emotions are a function of our intuition, I believe. How we're feeling is a reflection of how we're responding to different factors in our world, whether that's events, conversations, individual people, like news stories. They all these factors make us feel something before we can actually consciously make sense of what's happening, you know? So it's like our emotions are like our first responders to whatever's going on in the world.
I love it. Nice. So that's a great beginning for what the Numinous has turned into. And I know part of our conversation where we wanted to go was this big I word about being an introvert. And for all of those who relate to that, even if, you know, however you relate to it, let's dig into what it means to feel like you're an introvert, but also have a big idea that like wants to live outside of you. I mean, I can relate to this so big time. And so I felt like this was a great place for both of us to start, because it's like, it's time for us who identify as being shy or really gaining our energy in a different space to be able to come into our power as well and let these ideas live outside of us. So
totally. And it's definitely still something that I am faced with daily, particularly as, you know, more and more in the world that we live in as content creators or voices or having a platform, there's much more emphasis on speaking and being seen and hosting events and doing things like this. And there is on kind of like writing behind the scenes, which is always what my comfort zone had been. I found a way to express myself and put my opinions and my ideas out into the world by writing. And not only by writing, but by writing under the banner of like someone else's platform. So it was a very like safe zone for me. So that's part of the reason why having my own platform felt like such a push, because it was like, well, now it's just me, and now everyone knows it's me. And like,
I mean, exactly what you described was like this little womb-like space, and then the Numinous forced you in a way to have to come out and, you know, be at the helm of the ship. And it doesn't necessarily mean everything we think it may mean about how public you have to be, but you do need to step forward, and you did that, and it's inspiring.
I did. And it's funny, it was only like last year that I actually put my like a photograph of my face on the Instagram.
Oh wow. Good.
I was still hiding behind like, well, it's the Numinous, it's not me, it's all my contributors, it's us as a collective. But people just kept being like, yeah, but it's you, it's your thing. And it feels really good to be stepping into that place. And I also think to be able to inspire or give other people who are maybe feeling shy, or like I'm a behind the scenes person, permission to go, no, it's okay, we want to see you too. And maybe you don't have to share as much or as loudly or as, you know, visibly as other people in the space maybe, but adding your voice to the mix is really, really essential, because we want to hear from the quiet ones. It's often the quiet ones, us introverts, who are actually doing a lot of the listening and the thinking behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And they can have actually really potent things to say.
Was any part of the claiming of the Numinous as you with your photo there, did it have anything to do with worthiness? Did it have anything to do with that thread that women often feel?
Yes, I think definitely there was, you know, we've all heard about imposter syndrome, another I word, right? And for a long time I was like, well, who am I? Like, really, who am I to have a platform and to be looked at and to have a loudspeaker to say anything into the world? Like, really, what? And so writing my book, I had my book out last year. Writing my book was kind of like another major push through that. And I still, even when it came out, I was like, really, my story? But yeah, people were buying my story. And like you said, and thank you, it's so lovely to hear it, to be reminded again that actually me sharing my story has helped people. Like, so many people have come forward and said, thank you for sharing your story. It means so much, you know? So yeah, the imposter syndrome thing is big. And I actually spoke about this in a session I led on Moon Club recently. How I'm actually kind of reclaiming that I word.
I love it.
Really, let's think about this. Why do we feel imposter syndrome? Because as women, as people of color, as people in other minorities, potentially, we've been taught, no, it's not your place to lead. No, it's not your place to be on the platform. No, you don't have anything value to contribute. So yeah, we're the imposters, and we're actually just doing it now.
I love it. And also a thing that I love remembering, and I was watching something yesterday on Gaia TV, and actually Lee Harris is going to be a guest on the Symposium, and he was talking about how we all just feel like we're imposters. He was talking about Adele, because he really admired her career and her choices, and how she thought it was all going to be taken away at any moment. It's I don't know, maybe it's just an innate human thing. And, you know, there's definitely groups of people who have felt the effects of that more. But just knowing that we're all sort of like, we're figuring it out, we're winging it. There's no manual written before we write the manual. So it's like, you know, if we all just let ourselves off the hook and be like, okay, yeah, I'm reclaiming this another I word. I'm reclaiming, you know, okay.
Exactly. Exactly. Which doesn't make it necessarily any easier or more comfortable.
It's true.
Like, I still don't do Instagram stories because I'm like, and I'm also like, well, that's not necessarily my power. That's not my power place.
Yeah.
You know, I can write a really considered and honest and vulnerable post for Instagram, but I'm not necessarily going to be the one to get on stories and kind of like just talk about what's going on.
I love that yeah, exactly. That you're saying that, because you're making it okay to pick where you want to be. You don't have to do every single thing because it's available or someone else is doing it and having great success. I feel like the more you can be authentic to yourself and stand in that truth and give from that space, the more people are going to feel it. But if you're forcing yourself to like show up in a way that's just not you, or you don't want to do, even if you change your mind later, I just think it's great to honor where you're at, like right now.
Yes, where you're at. Exactly. It may be that things develop and I feel that passionate about something that I have to just get on there and like shout about it. That might happen, and who knows? But in the meantime, I think, less comparison, of course, and less kind of like, trying to model on the way it is done.
Exactly. So in this process of, being born into the world, a thing that I was really thinking about is like, how does a sensitive person deal with critique? So like, you've had the idea, you've incubated it, you've given it the love, it's come into the world, it's something beautiful, but of course there's going to be people who probably aren't creating anything, who have a lot to say about it, There's a kind of like, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but when you're also creating something and you know how much like vulnerability it takes just to like put it out there, I feel so less in judgment of anything anyone creating. I'm just like, they're doing something, they're like listening to their heart. Like how do we deal with critique? Because it's inevitably going to happen. Yes. Like, what do you have secrets? How do you do it?
It's really tricky, right? And I've got this like written down somewhere, haters are actually lovers in disguise is one thing I love, because it's like for someone to actually be bothered to comment on something, even if it's negative, that it's possibly coming from a place where they would love to see you do better, like, which is possibly coming from a place of love and appreciation. Not always. It's one way to frame it that kind of like helps me to frame it. If someone feels like they take the energy to write a long comment or something, then okay, great. They care about what I have to say. That's something, true. Right?
That's so true. In some way they do. They're like putting energy into that big, long response.
Exactly. I guess the first time this really happened was when my book came out. There were loads of great reviews and then a few that were just kind of like, oh God, this is all so bland. I could just Google all this, or her voice sounds like a 15-year-old, like a 16-year-old. Like, it was just, there were some that were just really like, and it really, really, really hurt because it's so vulnerable to put yourself out that way. Like my book was very personal, way more personal than I intended for it to be. It just kind of went that way. And to get those kind of comments was really, really hard. And there wasn't any quick fix to it. It's been a question of getting kind of used to it, getting kind of used to, okay, well, that's kind of what happened. That's like part and parcel of having a voice in the world. And so it's been partly just developing a thicker skin, I guess. But then the other thing, I did an amazing public speaking workshop recently with a woman called Gail Larson, and I definitely recommend.
I've heard of her just around the way. I'm going to write that down.
So great. Transformational speaking is the name of her workshop, because public speaking as an introvert is also something I found myself having to do a lot and not feeling very okay with. So it's like, I'm going to get some professional help with this one, and she's amazing. But she kind of like spoke a lot about you're not going to be for everyone. Find your people, like speak to your people. Don't feel like you have to have the answers or the voice or the stories or the presentation or the whatever for everyone. Like some people are just not going to get it, and that's okay. That's been really, really helpful as well. Just thinking like, I'm not for everyone. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important for everyone or more people to start sharing, because it's like there's a voice for every audience, it's just that maybe some audiences aren't really being served yet or fully,
Exactly. And that's part of, this conversation about, the reasons that people haven't come forward with the dream they have, or maybe they think it's not good enough, or like someone over there is doing it, but someone needs like the exact way that you're going to say something. Someone needs the exact package that your thing is going to come in. I just feel like there's room for everyone, So I love
exactly.
that's actually part of the public speaking thing. It's kind of just like takes the weight off of you, because you're like, oh, I'm just like talking to my people, like talking to my girlfriends, like I'm talking about something I love,
Exactly.
It's so much easier than trying to impress someone that you think has no interest in it anyway. So.
Yeah, exactly. I want to share one story about something else that happened recently, because it was very empowering for me, and it was a real lesson in how even as a quote unquote leader, you don't have to be perfect or have all the answers. I wrote a piece about a book that a friend of mine was launching called Thin from Within, and it's kind of like a spiritual weight loss book, I suppose. She's really talking about like the way to reach your ideal weight is to really kind of like do your inner work and kind of like learn to love yourself. So I thought this was a really positive message, and I shared about my own kind of like history with eating disorders and stuff in a post I wrote about it. But the comments were overwhelmingly angry with me for supporting a book that even talked about the word thin, or the concept of thinness, as an ideal.
Trigger word for a lot of people.
Oof. And I kind of knew it would be. Like, I knew when I went into this, I was like, I want to start some conversations around this. What I didn't realize was a lot of what I would get schooled on was my thin privilege. How, as a thin person, even if I had, if that had been a struggle for me, I was not really in a position to be speaking about issues that affected other people very differently. I mean, it's definitely, thin privilege is a really interesting thing to look into, and worth kind of like Googling. There's some really good writing on there about it. But the way I dealt with that, and this felt like it was so empowering for me and for other people involved. There was one woman who had reached out with a very articulate comment, and just her comments really kind of like opened my eyes to some of the bigger issues around body image and stuff. And so I was able to reach out to her, because I have a platform, and invite her to share about her work and to write a piece for the Numinous. And she was thrilled. Like, she was like, I was so nervous when I put that comment. Like, I love what you do, but I just was like, I couldn't just let this go. And I didn't want you to hate me. And I'm like, no, I don't. I think this is great. Thank you for like educating me. And so she wrote this post, and it was just like, it became a real learning experience. And it felt to me like a real model for sort of modern leadership in a way. We're all learning from each other all the time.
Exactly.
And you can have a platform, and if you have a voice, then give that to other people sometimes, so that they can share too, and they can educate you and educate others.
No, I love it. I love that you turned that moment into something that was inclusive, because I think that if people feel excluded by a word, and it's such a hot topic right now with people who are in the transformational space, is like, it's, anyway, I just think that was a great way to include someone else in a conversation that felt very personal.
Yeah, but it taught me so much too. And I came out of it feeling stronger, more well-rounded. Like, I know more about my audience. I know more about the world and me. Like, it was such a positive experience that came out of what could have felt like a really nasty piece of criticism.
Or an attack or something.
Exactly.
The fact that you took it as that and learned from it and gave someone a voice, like it just seems like a win-win. And I was just saying to my friend, that's the only thing I'm interested in now with relationships and with business. Like, if it doesn't feel as good for you as it is for me, then, there's someone else that really can like tap into that total win-win.
I love that. I'm actually reading the memoir at the moment of Shep Gordon. There was a documentary out about him called Supermensch, and he's like this legendary kind of music industry manager from the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Oh, cool.
And he had a reputation as being like the nicest man in the music industry to do business with, but he was also super successful. And in the beginning, in the intro, he talks about his approach to business. It's all about creating win-win situations.
Oh, I love it. And this is funny, because this is sort of turning into, I want to put, I'll get that from you to put it in the notes, because in my last interview, there was some amazing books and suggestions. So it feels like, I don't know, it feels like that's a thread. Like, maybe a lot of people will be like, I love reading, like ravenous readers, and will really want to plug into a story like that. Because that's a powerful statement for the times that we're living in, because we're seeing this old way crumble, and there's something new emerging, but we're not quite sure what it is. And so just to tap into someone who's been in business doing it that way for a long time and is a man, I find that super inspiring.
Really inspiring.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about how you went from being in a family where that mysterious force that we're all surrounded by wasn't really talked about, to creating a platform where that's what you're talking about to the whole entire world. Like, my thoughts before when you were telling me that was just, were people shocked and being like, well, what are you doing? Like, did your family think you had gone crazy? Like, how did that?
A little bit. I mean, they weren't like anti-spirituality. My mom was kind of a bit of a hippie, so she was sort of into yoga, more in the sort of like healthy food and alternative medicine things. So she was into that kind of stuff. And my dad, like, it's funny, he would love to go for like walks out in the wilderness in England and just be like, wow, just feel the majesty of the world. And like, so he definitely connected to spirit, I suppose, but without necessarily having any words for it.
And those are kind of my favorite people, really. It's like, the people that just experience life in this really deep way and may not need what other people need. I've just been finding that so refreshing, because I've been, I don't, you maybe similar, just like been to a million workshops and just seen it all. And sometimes it's just nice to see someone that's like, nature does it for me, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I guess what I didn't grow up with was any kind of a language for it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I loved astrology, because even from a very young age, it helped me to name like my place in the cosmos, you know. It helped me to really picture myself as part of like a bigger system that was at work, this kind of mystical system. So yeah, I mean, I guess none of them were that surprised. Like, I mean, to be honest, my family just aren't honestly that close. Like my dad has a second family now and he's very, very involved with them. My brother's like got his own kid now. And so, you know, but I did give my manuscript to my mum before it had even been edited. And that was like just a huge moment of healing, and a huge kind of like coming home to even having a really close relationship with her. When I moved out of home when I was about 16, and I was in a relationship with a much older guy. And from that moment had really kind of like closed her out of my life. Like we didn't really have much of a relationship besides anything super surface.
Yeah.
And so when I gave her the manuscript for my book, it was really like, I was so nervous because I realized only then I realized how like for 20 years I hadn't really shared like what was going on a deeper level for me.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the kind of impact that had in our relationship. There was lots of stuff in there that was very painful, and she found it very difficult to read. But ultimately, she was like, this helps me to, I feel like you've come back. I feel like I've got my daughter back. It was really amazing. And beyond that, like as I said, when I was a kid growing up in the late 70s, she was super into macrobiotic food and yoga and Ayurveda and all this stuff. But she's a psychotherapist now. And I think that she sort of, as she moved more into kind of like clinical ideas around healing and wellness, she kind of like put all that stuff a little bit back in the closet. So she said to me, she was so grateful for my book for kind of like reminding her of parts of herself, like reminding her of who she used to be. She went out and bought a bunch of crystals. And
I love it.
So she really got it. And it's been a real homecoming for us. My dad and my brother are still not even skeptical. They're just kind of like not really interested.
Yeah.
Which is painful in a way that feels like a bit of a critique as well. I don't think either of them have really bothered to read it. My brother will occasionally occasionally he'll be like, so what's happening for Virgo this week then? Because if there's big things going on in his life, he'll be like,
I wonder, she'll know.
I wonder. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I was just curious about that little nugget. And then just hearing about the healing that came about with you and your mother. Mother's Day is coming up. That's just, it's an interesting segue. And I just feel like sometimes in these interviews, you know, we have ideas about how they're going to go, but sometimes you just like pull on a thread of whatever is there. And I find it interesting that sometimes when you're on at least I feel like this for me, when I'm on my path and I'm really doing what I'm supposed to, what feels good to me. That type of healing can happen, you know, even through reading of difficult words or having difficult conversations, that type of healing can happen when you're in your purpose and like listening to yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, I think that the book happened in the midst of and sparked even more like really deep, very raw, super honest and painful conversations between me and my mom. And those simultaneously have been the most healing experiences of my life, just having those conversations with her. And it really made me realize like how for so many of us, we can go through our whole lives not really getting into like the real root of like what the thing is. Because sometimes we can't even see it. Like I feel so grateful that my mom, the reason she's a therapist now is because she did like 15 years of her own, was in therapy herself for 15 years, like really dealing with the roots of her stuff. And so I feel so grateful now that she's willing and able and has the capacity like intellectually and emotionally to be able to go those places with me, you know? It's really amazing. And it's one of the things that I now feel like I really want to help other people to do. And it comes back to like, well, why is this emotional healing thing actually so important to me? It's because it's what I needed in my life. And now that I've been able to experience that with her in particular, but for all other means, I feel more and more empowered to be able to help other people find that too.
Exactly. And that empowerment, just on an energetic level, I've realized a lot of times when I go through a big thing and I let myself feel something, or I talk to someone about it, how much energy that was holding me, like holding back from my true mission. I'm like, whoa, I feel so much lighter. I feel so much more empowered. I give less fucks about what's not important. And here I am, like, I'm transformed by this thing that seems so scary. So just speaking about that and what it does is a huge thing. And there is something I want to share, and it was part of the last exercise I did. So maybe something that you try with your free writing. And so the prompt was something that you wanted to say but didn't. And just 3 minutes of writing about that, I was like, whoa, I need to have some conversations with some people, some of the ones that may be holding back part of that energy that I could be using towards creating what it is that my heart really wants. And so it's so beneficial.
It really is. I mean, I've been noticing I've been getting a really bad stiff neck, and it's been coming. I've noticed every time I have some kind of time when I'm going to do public speaking or like lead an event or do some big thing, I'm like, oh, the neck is back. And it happened the weekend I was doing that public speaking course. And it was on the way home. I was in a stopover in Dallas, like flying back to New York, and called my mom and had a conversation with her. I needed to have, called my editor at Harper. I'm writing my second book, and had a difficult conversation with her too. And like the neck, just like literally as I got on my second flight, it's like, oh, I can move my neck again. And like, it literally has manifested physically as a physical pain. And I think that actually, I mean, there's tons of research around this, and I'm not going to go into it deeply, but there are real links between physical pain and physical illness and the emotional baggage that we just are hanging on to, that's literally using up our energy that could otherwise be used for healing.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. No, I think that's it's a powerful thing. And I think more and more science will show us witchy people who realize that, if you hold an emotional state, it creates chemicals in the body that can do everything from a stiff neck to, I'm dealing with psoriasis, and I totally understand what it's about. A lot of it's like a release of a big emotion, but I mean, I do find those things are so connected.
Definitely.
So one thing I want to touch on that we haven't yet is for those people who are watching, who are like, okay, I'm incubating this idea. I feel like on the precipice of a jump, like into action. Was there a point for you where you remember, it was almost like, you said divine intervention with your husband's job, but there's probably several points like this. They happen all the time in creating something. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think there's a lot of people who are at that phase where it's like they're about to create something, and there's a lot of voices that are telling them they can't. What was it that was the final push for you just to put the numinous, or even like, we haven't tapped into this sober curious conversation, which I'm super curious about. So whatever feels the most relevant for that question.
Well, with the numinous, it was moving to New York, but not just because it was moving to New York. It was because it was moving to New York.
Yeah.
So this town is where people come to make things happen. It's an entrepreneur's town.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that until we moved here. And I remember about 6 months after we moved here, it's the kind of town where everyone wants to introduce you to people they know who might be able to help you out and whatever. It's just very connective like that, which I love. And someone introduced me to an astrologer friend, and just over tea, I kind of told her about this idea for the numinous, and she was like, you have to do it. You've got to start. And she organized like almost immediately a brainstorming session with another friend. And then we went, and then it was kind of like, okay, well, I guess it's happening now, because it's like people know I'm doing it now. So like it's kind of happening. And so from there, I very quickly, registered the domain and like wrote the first post and had a friend do a logo and just kind of like got it up.
Nice.
So that was a real kind of like out of the gate, was just sharing it in a way of like, okay, this is happening now. But I think also by that point, I got so bored with myself for like just thinking about it. I just kind of started to get really angry with myself. Like, you ever going to do this? Like, just do it.
You're fed up with your own shit, and you're just
yeah,
like,
I was just like, oh,
there's
come
no
on.
excuse powerful enough to hold you back from like your dream. I think we all have to get there at many moments. No, but I love that. That's such a good tip. It's just like, and I often use that too. It's like, I'll put it out in the world and then I've got to do it. I just need to be held accountable, or I can just like call back to safety so easily. So like, you know, get a little vulnerable and tell a friend, or, you know, get connected with the right person. Just keep
I would even say don't tell a friend, like do a professional kind of like reach out to someone who you'd like to collaborate with, because then you're really accountable. If it's a friend, they can just kind of like,
that's true,
let you off, you know, make yourself in some way accountable, like get someone else professional involved. Make a logo, you know. I
love it. No, that's true. Yeah, that's the next level, not your friend, because they could let you off the hook.
Exactly.
Nice. Okay, so can we tiptoe into what's coming next, and with the Numinous, and people that are curious about, is it soda? Is that
Yeah, well, so I mentioned my other project is called Club Soda NYC.
Okay.
SODA stands for sober or debating abstinence.
Okay.
And this again was a project is born very much out of a kind of personal need and a personal experience in my life. As a part of my spiritual awakening, meaning as a result of introducing these spiritual practices, which were connecting me back to a more kind of authentic and resonant sense of self. That's all I think of as a spiritual path, like, or a spiritual practice, anything that brings you back to like, who am I really?
Yeah.
What am I here to do? A large part of that, it had really been shining a light on the way I was using alcohol, and the way drinking was actually preventing me not only from having that connection to myself, but from really feeling my numinous nature, and from really kind of having the self-confidence to put myself out there. It was having this negative impact on my life in so many ways, something which I'd always seen as just a way to have fun and like a way to relax and kind of let loose. It's became very evident to me over the course of a couple of years that it was not just that. Like there were things I was numbing out from, there were ways it was preventing me from really being my full self. And when I looked for kind of support or somewhere to talk about this, all I really found was AA. And I didn't identify as an alcoholic, and that didn't feel like my story or my truth. So I decided to see if there were any other friends who were feeling the same. And lo and behold, there were a few who were like, yeah, actually alcohol, I keep drinking and it doesn't feel good. And I don't know why I'm like using this thing, but it's hard to stop because it's just what everyone does. So I started had a little meetup in my apartment, and it just became very evident that there was a gap for a bigger conversation or like some more support around this. So Club Soda NYC is that, and became an event series, which has only been like quarterly. We do them every few months. But off the back of that, it's really funny. Out of everything I've created and done in the world, that's the thing I get asked to speak about most. People want to write articles about it. People want to do podcasts about it. And I mean,
it makes so much sense. It's filling a giant gap, because there's a lot of people who would even avoid having the conversation or getting in community because there's just nothing for people who.
Exactly. Or because we automatically go to, if you want to stop drinking, you go to AA, that there's automatically this kind of stigma around, well, does that mean I'm an alcoholic? Does that mean I have a disease? Like, is there something wrong with me? You know? And it could be that alcohol, you're addicted. It could be, I happily will say I have been addicted to alcohol in my life. I think that's just the nature of the substance, you know, but not to the level of being an alcoholic and needing to be abstinent for my entire life. So there's a big gap. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been so, particularly because more people are into wellness and more people are into spirituality. And once you start pursuing either of those routes to kind of like self-actualization, it really does make you go, oh, how is alcohol supporting this? Actually?
It's a conversation about right relationship, and like with someone who really enjoys the plant medicine space, it's all about that. Otherwise it can't be something else. So I love it that's what's being established, is just like getting back into right relationship with something that can be used in a totally healthy, normal way. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, coming, in cities like London and New York, it is used predominantly in an unhealthy way, I believe. And
yeah,
so
there's a whole mass culture that supports its use in that way. So I love that you're just like throwing something in the spoke to be like, hold on, like let's have a different conversation about what's actually
that's
going
exactly what it is. So I'm currently working on my second book, which is called Sober Curious.
Nice.
That's what I call this. It's like being curious about what would a more sober life look like, you know? And just really, asking all the questions and seeking to answer all the questions about how and why and what for and what effect does drinking do, you know? So it's been a really personal journey that's been about the same long time as me doing the Numinous. I started first questioning it kind of, right back at the beginning, 7 years ago, I guess. And so, that's currently, I'm writing that book at the moment. It's going to be out January 1st, 2019.
Awesome.
Like I said, part of my Numinous rebrand has been like, well, I have Moon Club, which you know about, which is our monthly kind of spiritual mentorship program. So all of these things feel equally part of the Numinous now, which is what my new website's going to reflect.
I love it. I can't wait to see. And I love that the word is curious, because there's a quote that I love, and it's just about being curious and not judgmental. And I think that's that's a word that invites people in. It's not like, it's just like an open door instead of a closed one.
Exactly. It really opens up every and any possibility. And I consistently throughout my book and while writing about it, I'm sharing my experiences, but your experience will be your experience. Your answers may be very different from mine. This is about you getting really curious. And the flip side of being curious is about being really honest with yourself.
That's so true.
You know?
I love it. Well, thank you for writing that. And thank you for having a conversation with me. If people want to find you, where can they go?
Well, the-numinous.com will possibly be all shiny and new by the time people are looking at this, which is great.
I can't wait to see.
And then the_Numinous is on Instagram. Those are the main places. My first book was called Material Girl, Mystical World. And she's still out there and bright pink and beautiful.
I see her all the time. So the last question that I'm asking people, unless there's something on your heart that you really want to share with the people who are watching the symposium, is what happens if you refuse to play by the rules?
Some people might get pissed off, but ultimately you will be free.
Oh, I love it. I love that reflection. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Ruby. I was thinking about when have I done that? And some people might be pissed off, but honestly, the freedom to create a life and work that feels really aligned with us is such a huge privilege. And if we get anywhere close to that, then I think we have a responsibility to use it and do some good in the world.
Yeah, and just what you get far outweighs those people that are going to be pissed off. So
that's about them. That's their stuff.
Exactly. You get to live a life that's like in alignment with your heart, which is really my greatest wish for myself and everyone else. So
me too.
Thank you so much, Ruby, for chatting with me.
Thank you.
It was such a joy. I feel like I learned a ton of stuff, and I feel like just grateful for this time.
They were great questions. I really loved it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.